This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Susie Garrett.
Within reach, the Dow may have snapped its winning streak, but 17,000 remains just points away. Which stocks got us here and which may lead the next leg?
Home sweet home. It was the biggest jump for existing home sales in 3 years. Is the housing market finally on firmer footing?
And rainy day funds. More than a quarter of Americans have no emergency savings. But there's a relatively simple way to get more money in your piggy bank. We have all that and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for this Monday, June 23rd. Good evening, everyone. I'm Susie Garrett.
And I'm Bill Griffith. Tyler Matheson is off again this evening. It looks like Dow's 17,000 is going to have to wait another day. Stocks have been on a tear lately, as you know, reaching historic closing highs for both the Dow and the S&P on Friday. But both those averages kicked off the new trading week with some modest declines. Another round of mergers would normally send stocks higher, but not today. And we'll have more on those deals later in the program. At the close, the Dow was down 9 points. The Nasdaq managed to eke out a fractional gain, enough for a fresh 14-year high. And the S&P was down by about a quarter point. Now, even with today's declines, the Dow is just 63 points from the 17,000 mark, rallying about 2% this year. So with a week to go in the first half of this year, Dominic Chu takes a look at the stocks that helped get the Dow to this point and what may lead the next leg.
We hit Dow 16,000 back on November 21st of last year, and a handful of stocks have helped propel the index towards the 17,000 mark. Since then, semiconductor maker Intel has been a star performer. Shares are up 19% during that time frame. Then there's pharmaceutical giant Merck. It's managed a 21% gain since the Dow hit 16,000. And the single best performing stock in the Dow Industrials over that time span has been construction and mining equipment maker Caterpillar. It's up a whopping 34%. Now, the question for many investors is, where will the next round of leadership in the stock market come from?
I think some of the areas that look attractive, for us, are in the technology space. A lot of the next generation technology companies that are focused on cloud and next generation architecture were sold off very hard in March and April. I think also in the consumer discretionary space, some of the mid-cap retailers continue to look attractive to us, as well as some areas of the healthcare space.
Of course, there will always be risks to consider as well, and some of those pertain to the bigger picture economy and even central bank policy.
I think you need to keep your eye on interest rates, and if they're moving too far too fast, that would be probably the beginning of a more substantial correction in the stock market.
Regardless of the risks, it's important for each individual investor to gauge their own appetite for how much they want to take.
What I would say to investors is the thing they should be most concerned about is their own intestinal fortitude. If they have a long enough time horizon, they need to remain committed to stocks if they're going to meet their long-term goals.
The stock market near record highs doesn't mean there aren't still opportunities, but one should definitely be aware of the potential pitfalls when making those decisions. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Dominic Chu.
Some good news about American factories. They're keeping busy, very busy. This month's reading of U.S. manufacturing was the highest it's been in 4 years. London-based research firm Market says order, production, and hiring all expanded in June.
And there was also good news in housing today. Sales of existing homes saw a stronger than expected leap in May, rising nearly 5% from April's rate. That was the biggest one-month gain in about 3 years. Sales may still be slower than they were a year ago, but realtors do cite a combination of more listings and stronger employment data for driving sales higher right now. And there may still be more to it than that. Diana Olick has our story tonight.
In Burbank, California, Eric Tan says the housing market is finally getting more stable. But stable doesn't necessarily translate into sold.
There are far more homes for sale. There's a lot more inventory. But at the same time, the number of buyers has decreased a lot.
Sales rose dramatically in the Midwest, likely due to pent-up demand from the bad winter. But in the West, where weather wasn't a factor, sales struggled, up less than 1% month to month and down a stunning 11% from a year ago.
When the buyers see overpriced listings, what we've observed is that buyers tend to shy away from those listings.
Inventory nationally surged 6% in May from last year, which helped moderate recent price gains. The median home price in May up just 5.1% year over year, the smallest increase since March of 2012.
The anecdotal is still implying that there are more buyers than sellers, multiple bidding still ongoing process. And many of the buyers frustrated by lack of choices.
Distress sales in May fell to the lowest level since the realtors began tracking it during the crash. Investors sunk to just 16% of all sales, and first-time home buyers are not picking up the slack. So while the remnants of the housing recovery begin to fade away, the market isn't exactly back to normal yet.
Young people are still recovering from a rough recession. They're at the point now where they're starting to move out of their parents' homes into their own rentals, but not yet into first-time homes that they're buying.
The last piece of the recovery puzzle that has yet to fall into place. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Diana Olick in Washington.
A busy day at the Supreme Court today. In one ruling, the court made it harder for investors to band together to pursue class action lawsuits when they claim to have been misled when buying or selling stock in a company. The decision will likely cut back on the number of suits that involve enormous sums of money. In a second ruling, a divided court blocked the Environmental Protection Agency from requiring permits for greenhouse gas emissions at new or modified facilities. The High Court said only Congress can make that determination. But the ruling does allow the EPA to regulate emissions from industries that are already required to get permits for other types of pollutants that cause global warming.
A lot of buzz right now on Wall Street about that newly elected House Majority Leader, namely Representative Kevin McCarthy in California. He's calling for the Export-Import Bank to be phased out. The government-run bank provides loans and credit insurance to foreign buyers of American-made products. Now, closing that bank would be a big blow for Boeing, for example. They saw their shares fall 1% today. Boeing sees big benefits from that bank's support for U.S. exports.
Well, efforts to abolish the Export-Import Bank is a sign of a critical view that some ultra-conservative lawmakers and Tea Party candidates have about government practices and policies that are considered business-friendly. That's making Tuesday's U.S. Senate GOP primary in Mississippi a closely watched race by both political leaders and the business community. John Harwood tells us why.
It's not just Mississippi Republicans and national Republican leaders who are going to be watching the outcome of tomorrow's U.S. Senate runoff in Mississippi. American business will be watching, too, because there are big stakes for business. On one hand, you've got six-term incumbent Thad Cochran, a traditionalist conservative, comfortable with existing institutions. On the other, you've got Tea Party favorite Chris McDaniel, a more confrontational conservative. And he would strengthen the wing of the caucus that takes a skeptical view toward the Export-Import Bank, the extension of the highway bill, comprehensive immigration reform, even keeping the government open and raising the debt ceiling in certain circumstances. Now, there are two ways this could have an effect depending on the outcome tomorrow in which McDaniel is favored to be the nominee. One is by changing the stance of the Republican Party itself, and the other is by potentially strengthening Democrats. Democrats believe they'd have an outside chance of holding this seat if Chris McDaniel is the nominee because he is so far right. You also have the question of whether the Republican Party can adapt and broaden its appeal for the 2016 presidential race. So it's a low turnout election expected on Tuesday, but big consequences. For Nightly Business Report, I'm John Harwood in Washington.
Still ahead, it's being called one of the most important events for biotech investors this year, and it could result in a breakthrough treatment for patients suffering from cystic fibrosis. That's coming up.
There is new hope for people suffering from cystic fibrosis. It's a regimen of medications that some analysts say could be the event of the year in biotechnology. And some Wall Streeters say it could mean a tremendous boost for shareholders of drug maker Vertex. Meg Terrell has more now in this new treatment and what it could mean for the company behind it.
Investing in biotech has always been risky, but there's an event coming up that analysts say tops all others this year. Vertex Pharmaceuticals is expected to report data soon on a combination of drugs for cystic fibrosis, a rare inherited disease that causes lung infections and other problems that can be fatal by age 40. Here's what you need to know about the program.
Cystic fibrosis is caused by mutations to a gene known as CFTR. When the gene's defective, the protein it creates can't help chloride escape the cell. That hampers the movement of fluid across the cell wall and leads to the production of thick mucus in airways and other areas. The first medicine to address the genetic root of the disease was Kalydeco, which restores the protein's ability to allow chloride to pass through the cell's membrane. Only about 2,000 patients with CF have mutations that Kalydeco alone can currently help. Many more, though, have a bigger problem. The protein can't get to the membrane at all. So Vertex is testing another drug, Lumacaftor, which aims to help the protein get to the cell wall, where then Kalydeco enables it to open a passage for chloride. The combination of both drugs could help more than 14 times as many people.
That bigger patient population also means bigger business, and positive data would be a huge driver for Vertex's stock. It's currently trading around $67, and analysts say positive results could drive the stock up past $100. A negative outcome could plunge it into the 40s. While cystic fibrosis affects few patients, Kalydeco, like other drugs for rare diseases, is priced at about $250,000 a year, and patients take the drug chronically. Kalydeco alone already draws $371 million in annual sales. Altogether, analysts estimate, if they work, Vertex's cystic fibrosis medicines could bring in more than $5 billion, not to mention the huge difference they could make for patients. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Meg Terrell.
Gas prices rose just 2 cents a gallon on average over the past 2 weeks, but get ready to start paying more. Because of the conflict in Iraq, experts now say drivers should expect prices at the pump to start rising sharply when the cost of gasoline catches up to the recent rise in oil prices.
Well, there is no gasoline needed for this new electric motorcycle unveiled today by none other than Harley Davidson. Now, the legendary motorcycle maker is considering bringing the new environmentally friendly bike to new markets around the globe as it searches for new customers. Morgan Brennan with the story.
It's called Project Livewire, Harley Davidson's first ever electric motorcycle. It can accelerate to 60 miles per hour in less than 4 seconds, but very, very quietly, with none of that roaring sound that Harley once tried to trademark. But the motorcycle isn't for sale. Instead, Harley's taking the prototype on a multi-city tour, looking for customer feedback, though not necessarily from its core male white baby boomer clientele.
For Harley, Project Livewire represents a significant shift in strategy, an electric motorcycle targeting a much younger, more global demographic.
Someone that's living in a city like New York City that wants to zip around, have the nimble responsiveness that this electric bike delivers. But in cities all over the world, Livewire is right in the sweet spot of that.
Harley's looking to expand its appeal after sales were hit hard in the downturn. And while shipments are now recovering, in 2013, they were still 25% below the company's 2006 peak. Analysts say core customers have been watching their spending, waiting longer to trade up on bikes, making the recruitment of new riders more crucial. Livewire is part of that push, and so are the two new street bikes coming to the market this year. But the electric motorcycle is still likely years from hitting the market. One reason the company's not disclosing the cost. Asking price will depend on the evolution of lithium-ion batteries, currently expensive to manufacture and with a limited battery life, only about 53 miles per charge. But Harley could face an even bigger challenge.
Doesn't make enough noise.
Trying to reinvent the company without alienating its tried and true customer base.
If I'm going to buy an electric motorcycle, I might as well buy a scooter or something like that, but not for me.
For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan in New York City.
Now, Harley's got to have noise, you know. Oracle seals a deal to buy Micros Systems. It's the biggest acquisition since 2010, and that's where we begin tonight's market focus. The tech giant will pay $5 billion for Micros, which makes software for restaurants and hotels. The move is an effort to reignite slowing growth. Just last week, Oracle reported rather disappointing earnings. Shares of Oracle rose a fraction to $41.10. Microsystems saw its shares pop by more than 3% to $67.97. Alstom has now finally agreed to sell most of its energy business to General Electric after months of negotiations. We told you last week that as part of that deal, the French government will also acquire a 20% stake in Alstom. The $17 billion purchase is GE's biggest acquisition ever, believe it or not. Despite the news, shares of GE were down 1% to $26.68. More deals. Wisconsin Energy and Integris are merging in a deal valued at more than $9 billion. The combined utility will serve more than 4 million gas and electric customers in Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, and Minnesota. Shares of Wisconsin Energy fell by more than 3% to $45.27. Shares of Integris, though, surged by 12% to $68.35.
And here's another update on the Allergan and Valiant takeover battle. Allergan advised its investors not to sell their shares to Valiant, which launched a hostile takeover bid last week. The Botox maker called the unsolicited offer, quote, grossly inadequate. Shares of both Allergan and Valiant fell slightly today. Allergan at $164.82, Valiant at $121.21. Shares of Nordic American Offshore surge on news that investor Leon Cooperman reported a 21.8% stake in that company. Nordic is a supplier of offshore energy vessels, and it went public earlier this month. Shares jumped more than 13% to $18.76. And AbbVie upped its 2014 earnings forecast. The drug maker, which is trying to buy Dublin-based Shire for $46 billion, cited strong business performance and said that it expects to continue to do well throughout the year. Shares rose a fraction to $53.75.
A new survey finds that too many Americans, especially those between the ages of 30 and 49, have no rainy day emergency savings. So why are Americans saving less money these days, and where does all their money go? Sharon Epperson takes a look.
When it comes to saving for a rainy day, everybody knows what they should do.
Try to save more, try to manage my money a little bit better.
You can't live check by check, because you never know.
Every time you get paid, you put something aside.
But there aren't too many people actually doing it. Do you have money put aside for emergencies?
I do have money saved. No.
More than a quarter of Americans have no emergency savings. Even as the stock market reaches new heights and parts of the economy are slowly starting to improve, Americans have made very little progress in their savings, according to a new survey by Bankrate.com. Half of Americans have less than 3 months' worth of expenses saved, the survey found. Fewer than 1 out of 4 have saved 6 months or more of expenses, the ideal amount recommended by most financial experts.
This lack of emergency savings and lack of sufficient emergency savings is pervasive in America. Even the highest income earning households, the top third of income earning households, fewer than half of them have an adequate emergency savings cushion.
Another study by the Corporation for Enterprise Development found that a quarter of middle-class households, those earning between $56,000 and $91,000 a year, are considered liquid asset poor, meaning they have less than 3 months' worth of savings to even live at the poverty level. That's less than $6,000 for a family of 4.
People are stunned when they see it's not just an issue faced by people who are traditionally viewed as poor. 89% of the people in liquid asset poverty are employed, which to me also refutes the stereotypes of people who are really living on the financial edge.
Many working Americans say they just don't have that extra money to sock away. Their paychecks have stayed about the same, even as there have been modest increases in expenses for food and transportation. That leaves little wiggle room in the budget. And not having a budget, a plan that includes how much to save and spend, is another obstacle that prevents households from stashing money away.
The biggest barrier to saving is not being in the habit of saving. And too many people, they try to do their saving this way. They wait until the end of the month and try to save what's left over. And guess what? Most of the time, nothing's left over, so the saving doesn't happen.
Financial experts agree a simple step can reverse that trend and get folks in the habit of saving. Just remember to pay yourself first. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Sharon Epperson.
Rick Edelman joins us now to talk more about how you can save for a rainy day. He's chairman and CEO of Edelman Financial Services. So, Rick, you heard in our package that the ideal amount to save is at least 6 months of a rainy day fund. Do you agree with that? And if you are living paycheck to paycheck, how do you even get started?
I think 6 months is too low. We learned through the credit crisis of 2008 that it was taking people 2, 3, 4 years to find new jobs after they lost their old one. 6 months is not long enough. So we advise our clients to have 12 to 24 months worth of spending. That's a really big number, I know, but if you found yourself in that predicament, you'd be glad you had that cash.
Yeah, but there's part two of that
if you're
question
trying to figure out, well, how do you do it? How do you start?
Exactly.
Where do you come up with the money? Just start. It's as simple as that. You know how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So if you're trying to amass thousands of dollars in cash reserves for a rainy day fund, just put away $20, $50, $100, whatever you can out of this paycheck. Don't worry that it doesn't seem like a too small amount of money. Just get started. And for those who are convinced they can't afford to, as Sharon mentioned in the package, pay yourself first. Before you start paying your bills, write a check to yourself and deposit it into a money market account or a bank account. You'll still be broke when you're done paying your bills, but now you'll be broke with money saved as opposed to having no money without any money saved. And my favorite strategy is to use coins. Most of us are now using credit cards and debit cards, paying electronically, but knock it off. Use paper currency. When you're buying a cafe latte, when you're making a small purchase, buying gasoline, whatever, use cash. And when they give you the change, take the coins and save them. I use a Planters peanut can. Throw it into a glass jar, a piggy bank, whatever. Yeah. Literally without trying, you'll come up with $50 a month in coins.
Yeah, I got a big jug, as a matter of fact. But, you know, I'm not going to make excuses for people who don't save, but let's face it, we live in a consumer-oriented society where barrage of advertisements come our way. Spend for this, spend for that, you know, the latest vacation and all. I mean, that is how we live our lives as Americans today, isn't it?
It is, unfortunately, and the peer pressure to constantly spend really does us in. When your coworkers say, hey, let's go out for a drink after work, well, $30 later, you know, where are you? So it is a problem. This is why we've got to break out of that habit. Another really good strategy to help you do this is to have your employer direct some of your paycheck directly to a savings account. Many employers will do this by having the money get diverted before you get your paycheck. You won't even notice it's missing, so that you can go out and have fun with your friends, and better yet, choose something that doesn't involve spending money. Instead of going to a bar, go to a library. Instead of going to a movie, go to a park. Go to a museum, go to a gallery show, do something, ride a bike, do something that doesn't involve spending money.
All right, so if I started today, right after the show, did what you're saying, how long would it take me to put together a 6-month rainy day fund, a 12 to 24-month rainy day fund?
If you're really starting from zero right now, we find it takes our clients typically 2 to 3 years. So don't worry that it's going to take you a while. You'll be amazed at how fast that time goes by. You've got your whole life ahead of you to pull this off. Remember, the longer you delay in starting, the longer it'll take for you to achieve this goal. And you do not want to enter retirement without having cash reserves. You don't want to face a job loss or a car repair or a roof leaking or a medical crisis facing you the situation of not having any cash.
All right. Thank you. A lot of good tips. Thank you so much. Rick Edelman with Edelman Financial Services.
I'll meet you at the library. How's that? Coming up, startups that are looking to make it big in the potential multi-billion-dollar marijuana economy. We have new reports tonight on an insider trading probe. According to Dow Jones, Dean Foods received a subpoena from federal officials related to that investigation of activist investor Carl Icahn, sports bettor William Walters, and golfer Phil Mickelson.
And finally tonight, the Colorado cannabis craze has sparked hopes for a new kind of Rocky Mountain high. Some 250 investors gathered in Denver today to hear pitches from marijuana-related startups looking to get in on the ground floor of those budding entrepreneurs. Josh Lipton was there.
It's a rapidly growing industry, one that is lighting up in the minds of some investors.
Wonderful. Welcome back.
Troy Dayton is the co-founder and CEO of the ArcView Group. It's a national cannabis investment and research firm, which over the last year has invested $10 million in 14 different marijuana industry-related startups.
I believe what we're seeing right now is the birth of the next great American industry.
While the excitement about this industry, because industry sources say that the $1.5 billion legal marijuana market could quadruple by 2018. And investors gathering here in Denver want to hear from startups looking to make it big in this budding industry.
We offer chill, giggle, create,
bliss.
So what we're doing is building a digital support application for cannabis retailers.
They aren't investing in the green stuff itself. Instead, they're looking more towards feeder industries like packaging, hydroponics equipment.
So we wanted to really standardize this process.
And customer service, which is what CannaBuild is offering. Its CEO calls his online service bud tending.
Jane Smith is sitting in Boulder, Colorado, and she may have a headache, and she wants to figure out what product is right for her. So through our application, she can find a bud tender online near her, have a session with her, and be able to find out what products will suit her needs best and reserve that product for in-store pickup at a later date. Very similar to your traditional standardized CVS experience.
Another startup here today called Ebu has already raised $2 million from investors who are excited about its focus on personal pot. Consumers can tailor how they want to feel.
And when you go to a bar right now, it's binary. You have one choice. Would you like to have a drink or not? Would you like to get drunk or be sober? With cannabis, we have the opportunity to set someone on a path so that they can have an array of different experiences when they try our product.
The industry still does face challenges. Selling marijuana is still a federal crime. But as the American public gradually embraces the idea of legalization and startups become more sophisticated in pitching investors, industry sources say there will be plenty of profit in pot. Josh Lipton, Nightly Business Report, Denver, Colorado.
Very creative with the company names, too.
Yes, they are.
That's Nightly Business Report for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm Susie Garrow.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
I'm Susie Garrett with a Nightly Business Report news brief. Dow 17,000 will have to wait another day. Stocks on Wall Street ended the day mixed. That's despite encouraging reports in May showing existing home sales soaring and American factory activity way up, with orders, output, and hiring hitting a 4-year high. The Dow fell 9 points. The Nasdaq eked out a fractional gain, and the S&P was off by a fraction. Two big mergers today. Oracle is paying more than $5 billion for Microsystems, and Wisconsin Energy is buying rival utility Integris Energy for nearly $6 billion. And a new survey says more than 1 in 4 Americans has no emergency savings, and half of us have savings to cover only 3 months' worth of expenses. Be sure to tune into Nightly Business Report right here on your public television station.